Good morning, everyone. There we go. Welcome to, what day is it today? Today is Tuesday. Welcome to another episode of Tea and Coffee with Paula and
Jay, sleepy Jay, tired
yeah,
Jay, happy to be home Jay. I got a lot of adjectives here today.
yeah.
How are you?
And same. I'm just glad to be home. It just already in my head. There's a list of things to get done today that I'm working on, and this is number one.
Good morning, everybody. And let us know how the sound is, because the sound for me yesterday was horrible. Sorry about that. I got to figure out what's up there. Playing with the mics on the road, and we didn't get to hear it till after. And yeah, I'll have to improve that for the next time. But I'm glad they enjoyed the episode. It was fun.
Yeah, I was certainly loud and clear during a lot of my speech. But yeah, well, like I said, you live and learn. We have equipment that you only really get to test sometimes while you're out and about.
I look really bright in this camera right now.
You do look really bright.
There we go. See how that works out for us.
Whiter than white.
But good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome home.
Oh, yeah. It's good to be home. It's good to be home.
Another long drive, 24 hours for a wedding. We must love that guy. And
yeah. Yeah. No, and yeah, just to reiterate, great to see them start their journey together. And yeah, and then we also got another interview done for the self-determination series for Alberta. So productive, not just recreational. So, but yeah, it's good to be home. And yeah, got tons of stuff to get done this week.
Got lots of videos to catch up on. So we got 25 recorded, 7 released. That leaves a big 18 of them back in the queue. Mm-hmm. Oh boy, I better catch up on that, because we want to get them out for October, November, the whole 50 series done by that time. Mm-hmm. So pay attention, everybody. Make sure you like, subscribe. Oh, there's a little button for that.
Yeah, hold on a second.
And make sure that you check them out and let us know, because they just get better and better and better each one that we do.
Yeah, I'm super proud that you've been getting this done and you asking the right questions for people. And then also it's to provoke and encourage conversation. So I think that's pretty cool.
Provoke. I like that word.
Yeah.
Because I've learned a lot. This is another series where I'm learning a ton. That's why I started the show, right? Mm-hmm. I was running for MP and I wanted to learn. I wanted to go in there with an education. And I'm sorry, but in high school, there wasn't a box that said learn Canadian history, local politics. And
maybe not yet.
There should be. Maybe someone will win something in the coming months. Maybe there will be. But yeah, I did that for that education, and now I'm getting an education on Alberta self-determination, and I'm sharing it because I think it's really important for people to not just get emotional about the subject, but to get educated. The more they know, the better their decision making will be. The more you know. And this is important to me: the history of Alberta. How did we join Canada? What is some of the stumbling blocks we've had as a province? How much effort have we tried in our attempts to work with Ottawa? What has Ottawa's response been? Both parties, as we've been working through this issue for many decades now. I think it's really important to share all this information with, because we're fresh Albertans, right? We're 4 years in, going into the 5th year of being in Alberta. I'm a forever Canadian, not forever Canada. Get confused there. Yes. But I've been a Canadian my entire life. You're going on to your 20th Canadahood.
21.
21.
Well, being in Canada, I did get my citizenship the same year we got married. Before we got married, so 2008, I became Canadian.
Yeah.
So yeah, so 17 years Canadian for me.
And are you learning a lot with this series?
Oh, for sure. And I think one of the things I've learned a lot before the series began was moving to Alberta and understanding how Albertans have been feeling and have made to be felt from the East. So that was quite the education, because I'll admit, while in Ontario, I didn't get the impression of dirty Albertans, dirty oil. That was just maybe not the circle I was in. But certainly coming to Alberta, I got an education on how they felt. And then one of the first things we got to vote on was equalization, and I got to say, well, what is equalization? It's like, oh, I actually don't support this, even though I've been living in a province that's been benefiting. I was like, no, I actually don't agree with this. So I voted no for equalization. And yeah, so it's my education really started as soon as we got into Alberta, and the history of that and how they are treated against the rest of Canada.
You make a good point. So from the prairies, somebody online said, hey, I like Jason, even though he's one of the Laurentian elites and grew up there. No, I did not grow up in Ontario and Quebec. I grew up, I was born in northern Manitoba.
Mhm.
Spent my younger years in Saskatoon. High school years was Winnipeg because the family split,
Yeah.
and we went with Dad into Winnipeg. And then just as I entered early adulthood is when I jumped on one of the last Greyhound Air. Yes, there was an airline for Greyhound at one point. One of the last Greyhound Air flights out east, and started my tech career. I was before that I was working in a factory painting the Abmaster in Winnipeg. So that was my career path until I jumped onto that plane and went east, landed in Oakville, Ontario, and then that's where my career started with technology. And then we came back. We came back after we sold a business, sold some property, and escaped from. And I say go, I come back because I came back to the West.
Yeah.
So I was always growing up in the West, and I love the West. So I'm not Laurentian. I may have a last name that may give you
Loving.
Loving. But no, I'm an English-speaking, French-named, French blood, both sides.
Yeah.
And our roots go back to 16. That's a 67. And I'm very proud to be part of the history of Canada. My ancestors, my ones before me. There's a lot of Levines in the House of Commons and in leadership and that kind of stuff. But yeah, when I came out here, I got a crash course in Alberta because it's just like you.
Yeah.
This isn't on the news. Like they don't really push this. Maybe more in Quebec than they do in Ontario. But no, I knew that there was a fractured relationship, but I've always looked up to Alberta. As a kid, it was kind of like that rich cowboy uncle growing up on the prairies because everybody knew that Alberta was better off. A lot of people went out there to work. And that was, and I did come out here a couple of times to live with family. We can get into that drama another day. But yeah, I've always respected Alberta. And when we were looking at options, it was Nova Scotia or Alberta. I think we picked wisely.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I was speaking to someone about that the other day, and we said we wanted to leave Ontario. And we were looking at places that had good sun in Canada, but we picked, between Nova Scotia and Alberta, we picked Alberta because they're more our kind of people. That's exactly what I say. They're more our kind of people. That's one of the reasons why we were leaving Ontario, because they weren't our kind of people anymore, and I didn't feel comfortable. So yeah, no, I'm very happy. And we've got a question here from Becky. Are Albertans the only Canadians that know about equalization?
Quebec does. I'm sure as a recipients of it, I'm sure they're very aware of it, the benefactors of it. It's not a major topic across Canada.
Yeah,
it really isn't, because the rest of Canada doesn't. Well, the Maritimes certainly benefit from it.
Yeah.
Saskatchewan, Manitoba are kind of on the zero level, like they're kind of maintaining themselves. I never knew about it in Saskatchewan, Manitoba. It never came up, but I did know about it when I was out in Ontario, only because I was starting to follow some of the politics and I was aware, but I didn't realize how bad it was. So when I first came out here, I thought, hey, how lucky of you as a province to be able to afford that. And then I learned the formula is not fair. Correct. The formula is skewed. It is not a fair reallocation of funds. And then I started to think about it more, like, why are we even reallocating funds? Well, it's the suppression of each province and their national resources. And there's artificial reasons why each province is held back. That because I started getting to a lot more politics in 2021 after we moved out here. That's when I started to learn, and that's when my brain readjusted. It said, okay, wait a minute. This is created by Ottawa. The haves and the have-nots. It's a creation. It's a labeling creation. And it is meant to milk the West, specifically Alberta, and hold it back on its prosperity. We could be a far richer country if we didn't have equalization and we didn't have the suppression of natural resources and trade within Canada. Like, if these things were not on the table, Canada as a whole internationally would be far, far better off.
Yep, I agree. And I think also Alberta would have better healthcare too. I am certainly, with a great nation with lots of resources, I don't mind the idea of assisting fellow provinces, but I do believe in Alberta first. There are things that we need to take care of first before our funds go elsewhere, and they are our funds. And so I think, I'd love to see, as any province and nation would, money going to healthcare, education, infrastructure. And let's take care of Alberta. And then, because there would be excess resources, I don't mind that then taking care of those who would struggle, the smaller ones who don't have the economic infrastructure or development. No problem. But that's not what's happening, and so we have to reevaluate ourselves as a province, and I think this is the great opportunity that we're taking right now.
I'm less empathetic than you. I don't believe.
Oh, let's mark this moment in time. 'Cause that is not normally the case.
Yeah, I'm less empathetic than you on this issue because I think welfare state creates dependency, and it's not an assistance. Teach a man to fish, he'll feed himself.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? You give him a fish, feed him for a day. And I see this in Canada on an individual level with the welfare system. Growing up in Saskatchewan, I was really exposed to that. My family tried to educate me on how to work the welfare system so I didn't have to work, but I could get paid. And by the way, children and having children is a big part of that plan. So I got exposed to that. I'm like, no. So as a young man, I jumped on I think it was a bus at the time too. Went out to Winnipeg, went back to Winnipeg. I said, no, I got to work my way up the chain here. This is the way to do it. It's the right way to do it. In Ontario, I was lucky enough to be part of a review panel for the Ontario Centre of Excellence, which was where grants were applied for various projects, from startups to expanding businesses to recovering businesses and all this kind of stuff. And I called that business welfare because I thought, well, they need to work. So I got a bit of a crash course there. And what really upset me about that program is when I saw like Air Canada, Bombardier, these large companies trying to just create programs and collect money and hire an intern by using tax dollars to do that. I was so jaded by that because I thought, what are you talking about? This is for small business or startup because it's supposed to assist, like you said, assist. And that's not what I saw happening there. I saw abuse happening there. I saw opportunist behavior because they were just taking the money because they could fill in the application. I didn't like that at all. And then on the provincial level, the provincial welfare, which is the equalization program, on its surface, and usually on its surface is where I would agree that it's there to help. But is it?
That's right. There's
Is it
always
really?
more to it.
Yeah, you kind of nailed it when you said assist them with infrastructure and stuff like that. If that's where the money went, like for example, Alberta's money went to help expand natural resource development in Quebec and solely for infrastructure of prosperity and development, I would feel more inclined your way. But it's not. It goes to social programs. It goes to socialize that province. It goes to appease people to kind of calm them down on the whole separation conversation in Quebec. It doesn't go to providing more. It's not teaching them how to fish.
Right.
It's giving them a fish. So that's where I'm going to be a little less empathetic. And I'm going to say, no, they need to get loans. Maybe they should be trading resources to us for this money.
Sure.
Maybe there's more interprovincial assistance on a loan type of program.
Because you've spoken about that before, exactly, yeah, and that builds better relationships or working relationships within the province as opposed to a handout.
Because what you end up getting is resentment from the people who are paying it. And when they go like, look, we're just sending money to Quebec and all they do is talk bad about us and they're not appreciative. There's even this notion that you should be appreciated. I don't even like that. Like even the idea that we should feel appreciated.
Oh, thank you. That
Exactly.
type of attitude. Yeah.
Where it should be, well, I'm glad that you guys are prospering. We don't have to send you any money. Pay back the loan. We're all square.
Yep.
That's kind of where I would prefer to see this. And this is what happens on the nation level through the sale of bonds and other mechanisms. Nations assist nations with loans and debt to help them in those ways. But to just pay social programs with no return, and that means on the provincial level as well, what's the return? You're just appeasing this behavior. You're not assisting. So I'm going to be less empathetic, and I'm going to say, no, we need to stop equalization, full stop. We can open up an assistance program through loans. We're happy to trade resources. You need oil, we'll send you oil.
Sure.
And we can even teach you how to get the product out of the ground for you if you got a lot of gas. And enter global markets directly. These are all things I think Alberta should be taking the lead on and assisting other provinces with stepping up their game that way.
Here.
Here.
I agree.
Yeah, because I've seen the welfare system abused by individuals, businesses, and provinces, and I don't think it works. I think it creates a dependent class.
Sure. And not just a class, a dependent province. Like a province as a whole, from all tiers of government, but they're expecting it. They're expecting that handout to be received.
What does the audience think? Do you think you should teach a man to fish or just give him a fish? Because that's what we're talking about here.
Well, how about the non-Albertans? Let's get your get your opinion, because I think a lot of Albertans aren't for it. From the people I've encountered and spoken to over the course of this last few years, but I'd love to hear from people out of province. What do they think about that? And while waiting for that, what's our next?
Well, at the Alberta Next panel,
yeah,
there were Albertans, so-called Albertans, that said we should be sending more money. They went up to the mic and said we should be sending more. Canada needs more money. Tax me more, one lady said. I'm pretty sure if we looked at her individual tax situation, she's probably not taxed. But yeah, tax me more, she said, and send more. We should be helping more, especially with Ukraine and other things, as we saw. Another $2 billion in support there.
Remember, billion with a B, people. Billion with a B.
And there's another example of welfare. What's our return on that? At least the U.S. made it a loan under Trump. So you're going to have to pay us back. We're going to come take resources and rare earth minerals and other stuff from your country for the money we've sent you. I don't think Canada's even approached that subject like that.
I would agree. I don't even think that is even suggested.
Yeah.
Comment here from Pietro. Left Quebec in 1979. That's a great year. And never heard of the equalization payments. Their focus was separation. It's only when I moved to Alberta that the truth about the equalization program came to light for me.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Yeah, because it wasn't, unless you looked into it, unless you paid attention to what Albertans were saying, you wouldn't know. Yeah.
And admittedly for myself, I'd never heard of it while I was in Ontario. It was literally only when I came to Alberta. So sorry for not being aware of it sooner, and just not being aware and all the ins and outs of our interprovincial relationships.
Good news is when people learn about it, they think it's unfair. They think it's unfair when they learn that the province is considered a have-not if you're in Quebec, which is so not true. They have plenty.
Agree.
They're just being restricted. The relationship with Ottawa, and this is part of the next panel as well that Danielle's talking about. Like, we should be getting a fair deal. Like, this is 2025, and we're still having this conversation about a fair deal. Like, we got to do the deal.
Yeah.
The question is whether or not that's possible at this stage anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And we will see as the days, weeks, months go on and more conversations are had and there's more feedback from people. Yeah, we'll find out.
Excellent. So today's conversation, we're going to get into Castle Doctrine, hardcore. But before that, because we have Maxime Bernier, Bruce Pardy, and David. Oh, can you say his name right there? It's up here.
Sabine.
Okay, so he's an Albertan. He's on the board of the Libertarian Party. He reached out as I was putting posts up about this. He says, hey, I would love to talk to you about Castle Doctrine here in Alberta, how it's needed, etc. So he will be joining as well. So we'll have a full panel today for you. Before we get to there, let's go ahead and bring up some posts here for you. Because it's been a little bit lively as we've been driving across Alberta and Saskatchewan. And one of the first things I want to say is Ontario, you're creating a new problem for yourself here.
Yeah, they are.
All right. So let's quickly take a look at this little video here, because I am not for this kind of behavior for sure. So for the people that are listening on the podcast, what we're doing is we're watching three gentlemen filling up bags of alcohol and walking out of the LCBO. They certainly have a presence of them that they have an entitlement to take this, and they look like new Canadians. And one of them's wearing a Canada hat, ironically. So here we go. This guy right there says Canada. He's got the flag on the side, and we know this to be LCBO, which is the Light Liquor Control Board of Ontario. So this is in Ontario. And this is making the rounds. And I put a post up that says, wearing a Canada hat while stealing alcohol from an Ontario store is a perfect way to say thank you. Mass deportation of criminals will fix this problem quickly, bring back rule of law. Even if they just deported these three guys.
Yeah.
And said, no, we don't do this here. This is not an entitlement. You don't steal. Even the fact that nobody even attempted to stop them. We've now turned into, or Ontario is turning into a California.
Exactly. We were very reminiscent of what we see in the US, where people just walk in and like just steal,
Yep.
just flat out steal.
Or the police don't do anything for anything less than 1,000.
Mhm.
And the irony here is there was no U.S. alcohol on the shelves in the LCBO, so they're actually stealing only Canadian products from Canadians in Canada, the Triple C there. And I think this is a huge slap in the face. I think this is the kind of behavior that needs to be extinguished quickly.
Mhm.
And even Castle Doctrine on a business level might discourage this behavior. But what we saw in Florida was there was a gentleman, and I always use that term out of respect for our audience when I say gentleman, because there's a lot of other terms that come to mind.
Used.
Where he did a U-turn on a highway with his truck, and we're seeing a lot more of this. And we actually saw this when we drove. There was a truck in the no U-turn lane, emergency lane between two highways. There's a truck trying to do a U-turn in a no U-turn place. I really wish I captured some video there because that's something we don't see. You don't normally see a truck in between the two lanes. They will pull off on an exit, do what they need to do to get back on an exit, but they don't do it on the highway. Anyways, I reminisce. Back in Florida, this is what happened. Killed 3 people because they were in the fast lane. This truck is now blocking the entire highway, ran into the side of the trailer, and dead. And Florida picked the guy up, put him in front of the camera, starts the deportation process, the criminalization process, and making a big example of that. Ontario should be doing that with these guys.
They didn't have the decency to cover their faces, which just shows the brazenness of it all.
Entitlement.
And they don't care.
Yep.
They don't care.
They think that whether they've got an alcoholism issue, whether they're selling it or whatever's going on here, this cannot continue.
Agreed. And we need a strong response from police. That's yet to be seen.
Yep. So we'll get into that. Hello, Whistle Stop. Nice little lunch there. Sorry we missed you, Chris, but it was great to see you. And then, of course, Drew Barnes. We spent some time with him.
Yep.
One post that got a lot of traction was about the per capita Canadians spend more on Ukraine. This has been bragged about by Carney, and it's certainly not sustainable, especially if we import immigrants like we just saw who are stealing from Canadians. We shouldn't be doing this. That's not sustainable. We gotta pull back these numbers. We gotta deport the criminals. So let's make sure you understand clearly illegal immigrants. And that means if you come here even legally, but you break the law, you become an illegal immigrant. You need to go back. So anyways, I think that the double-edged sword, not the double-edged sword, the 1-2 punch of spending billions, welfare on other countries, and then opening up our doors for our services and our liquor stores are a big mistake. I think these are things that Canada should be taking seriously, but I don't see them doing that anytime soon.
Unfortunately. Yes,
unfortunately. All right, so we're going to get into the Castle Doctrine. Anything else you want to cover before we jump into our main topic?
No, it's just unfortunate. I saw the video this morning, and like I said, the brazenness of it all. They didn't even cover their faces, which means. And here's the thing: don't get me wrong. I'm an immigrant. I have children.
How many bottles of alcohol have you stolen?
Yeah. But there are also been immigrants who've been here decades ago, and they've got their next generation. Those are not these people.
No.
Those are not these people at all. And I want to be clear, because what we've also seen in the US is that they've been complaining like, ICE is going after all the immigrants. No, not going after immigrants. They're not going after people of color. They're going after illegal immigrants. So I think it's very insulting to immigrants when they says, they're going to come and they're going to take you away. And we've seen a lot of them speak up, says, no, I'm here legally. Or I'm a citizen already. Like, no, I'm not doing anything wrong. And they're even highlighting it's the illegals. And that's the same for here as well.
Yep.
It's not people of color. It's illegal immigrants who are brazen enough to do things like this. It's wrong.
Yeah, you become a nanny state, expect childish behavior.
Correct.
Childish behavior is immature, and they do whatever they want. We don't need that. That does not expand or grow our country. And when we get into Castle Doctrine now, you'll see that even this is part of that.
Right.
By being soft on crime, by making it difficult for people to defend themselves, with their property, their lives, their family, and criminalizing the action of defending yourself and putting the burden on you to show that you had reasonable force are all ways to soften these things and cause more of it. when criminals are not afraid of breaking into homes, they're going to break into homes.
And when the police are even telling you to unlock your door, leave your key fob at the door, then you're only enabling them even more. You're emboldening them because, like, oh look, even the police are saying don't worry about us.
Yeah, they're making fun of that on a Conservative Vibes.
Yes.
Yeah, show that we watch on YouTube. Check it out if you want a good laugh. But making fun of Canada there, because in Canada, there's the police in Toronto saying leave your key fobs at the door. That's all they want. And do that. And then they show police in Florida that says shoot them, save us money.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
we even offer courses on how to.
That's right.
Gun. Yeah.
We'll show you how to shoot them, and you'll save the state a bunch of money because we don't want to deal with these criminals either. Unlock
your door, leave your key fob, because they're only going to go after the car. No, they're going to take more steps into your home.
Well, what an invite! Like, what an invite!
It was a ridiculous press conference. It was a completely ridiculous press conference.
Now, some people were applauding, and I was pleased that Danielle came out. Danielle Smith, our premier here in Alberta, came out and made these comments. But let's also dissect it a little bit, and then we're going to be jumping into our first guests.
Premier, I wanted to get your reaction to a incident, I believe, in Lindsay, Ontario, where a man is now facing criminal charges for defending himself from a home intruder. What are your thoughts on that situation?
Well, if you don't want to get shot or beaten up, don't break into people's houses. Pretty straightforward. We had a similar incident in Alberta where somebody defended themselves, and they determined that there was not a reasonable likelihood of conviction, because we do expect that people are going to use a reasonable use of force to defend themselves and their families, and I support that.
Okay, so on its surface, the first half, you're like, yay. Yay, we like that. The second half is what I bring to your attention. She highlighted that there was somebody in Alberta that did something similar and was charged.
Yes.
And it was determined, so meaning the court or the crown determined that there was a reasonable force, which means that wasn't Castle Doctrine. That fell under self-defense. And that did put the burden, at least to the charges, onto the homeowner, who reacted in a similar fashion, as she said, which may or may not have turned out well for them.
Correct.
So I just want to highlight here that even though Danielle said, hey, look, if you don't want to be shot or beaten up, don't break into a house. She also highlighted that under the Criminal Code of Canada, there was still a process to determine whether or not reasonable force was used. And that's a big difference between Castle Doctrine and self-defense. Under Castle Doctrine, you can use any force to protect yourself. In the US, there's two situations that just came up. One in Illinois, the guy had a screwdriver, broke in, went upstairs to the bedroom. The woman put a bullet through his head, ended his threat. And that was that. That was that. And then in Texas, two people tried to break into a home, dressed as police officers. They had bulletproof vests on. They're ended. Their journey came to an end. And that's that. That's Castle Doctrine, where if somebody makes the decision to go ahead and try to enter your property or enter your property, all choice for the homeowner is to use force that they deem to be necessary, not necessarily what you call reasonable force. And that's what we have here in Canada, because there's a process. So now we have all our guests here. So let's go ahead and bring them on. Bonjour, comment ça va, Maxime Bernier? How are you?
Ça va très bien, bonjour. I'm very pleased to be with you.
Our pleasure, as always. Nice to see you again. And we got our good friend from Ontario, Bruce Pardy. How are you doing? Oh, his video might be coming and catching up, so we'll leave him there. And we got a new friend. How do you say David's last name?
Sabine.
Sabine. David, is that correct? David Sabine?
Yes, that's right, especially in Eastern Canada. In Western Canada, sometimes it's Sabine, but I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Excellent. So well, I'm sure Bruce will fix his side, because we do see him, and he's there. So good morning, Maxime. Good morning, David. And Bruce, if you can hear us. Oh, here we go.
Yes,
he's alive.
Hello there.
Oh,
good to see you.
Good. You can drop the chat for this part. Actually, let me just do this. All right, gentlemen. It's nice to see all three of you here. And what we're talking about is Castle Doctrine. As we saw in Lindsay, Ontario, a man's been charged for dealing with a home intruder. The facts that we know is the home intruder was armed. He's been charged with possession of a weapon for a dangerous purpose, which is a serious offense under the Criminal Code of Canada. So this gentleman absolutely came prepared to cause fear at minimum, and possibly death at the high end of the scale here. But yet the homeowner is still charged. Maxime, People's Party of Canada, since the very beginning, Castle Doctrine. You're a lawyer, and you know the difference between Castle Doctrine and self-defense in Canada. Because in self-defense in Canada, the burden's basically put onto the person that used force to show it was reasonable. And then we have that whole barrier to cross. And we just played a video from Danielle Smith where she said, in Alberta, we determined it was reasonable, and this is how we do things in Alberta. But that still highlights the Criminal Code of Canada puts a burden on the use of force on the homeowner or the person protecting their property. You want to kind of highlight some of that?
Yes, you're right, Jason, about that. In Canada, our proposal, the People's Party, is to change and modify the Section 35 of our criminal code to be sure to have that Castle Doctrine. So what will be the impact? Like you just said, the impact is, you have the right to use everything that you think is reasonable yourself to defend yourself and your property. Here in Canada, you must show and you must demonstrate that you use a reasonable force to defend yourself. But, if somebody is entering into your house with, I don't know, just a baseball bat and you use a gun under the Castle Doctrine, it must be okay to use your gun. And so, yes, our proposal is to change the criminal code to have that Castle Doctrine in our criminal code. And like that, there's no debate about did you use reasonable force or not. And yes, you can use force up to, deadly force under the Castle Doctrine. So that's why we at the People's Party, that's part of our position. If you believe in self-defense, we must have that in Canada in our criminal code.
And I would agree with that. And then, Bruce, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to you now because you're quite the lawyer, a great man. And by the way, we're going to bring you back for some other topics that we talked about in X. But on this particular one, where I'm really disappointed, even with Danielle Smith's comment, is this is the Criminal Code of Canada, Section 25, as Maxime says. And are we supposed to ask the person coming in, well, which weapon do you have? And then try and match like a mutual combat situation so we can, not go to jail over this? What are your takes on that? Because you're in Ontario and this event happened in Lindsay, Ontario.
Right. So one of the difficulties here is that we don't know exactly what happened. Right. So we've heard that the invader was charged and he had a weapon, a crossbow, perhaps. And we understand that the homeowner grabbed a knife, and then we don't know exactly what happened after that. We know that the intruder was injured. So let me give you two scenarios. If the homeowner grabs a knife because he hears somebody downstairs and there's a guy, in his kitchen with a crossbow, and he uses the knife to protect himself and his family and his home, then you would like to think that would be totally understandable and reasonable and lawful. But let's change it a little bit. Let's say he stabs the guy drops the crossbow, he's on the ground, he's no longer a threat, and then the homeowner, I'm not saying this actually happened, but just imagine that the homeowner at that stage goes and stabs him more times while he's on the ground. Okay? Well, we might say that that's now over the line. And the challenge is to reflect that line in the criminal code. Here's the irony. We had sections in the criminal code that more or less reflected a Castle Doctrine up until 2012. In old sections 40 and 41, there were defenses that described the situation where if you are in possession of your own home and somebody is trespassing in it, then you are entitled to use whatever force is necessary to get that person out. Those sections were repealed. Now, who were they repealed by and when? They were repealed in 2012 by the Harper government. And instead, we have sections 34 and 35, which were an attempt to create a generic catch-all defense for self-defense and defense of property that lists all kinds of factors. And here's the problem that the way Section 34 and 35 are constructed, it gives a great deal of discretion to the prosecution and then to the court to decide whether you're on the right side or the wrong side of this line. And that means that for regular people, there is a huge amount of uncertainty. You're living with the uncertainty about how far you're allowed to go in order to protect yourself and your family in your own home when you're invaded. And that is not appropriate. So we would be better off, I think, with the old law that we had. The castle doctrine is a doctrine that has been around in the law for ages. You know, comes from the Romans.
Castle times.
Castle time. Well, even before castle times. I mean, the origins are thought to have come from Roman times, but certainly the English common law developed it and been adopted by many of the states in the U.S. in different forms. You know, it's all been legislated in different words, so it's not exactly the same thing everywhere. But the basic idea is your home is your castle, and if your castle is invaded, you are allowed to do whatever is necessary to defeat the threat and get the person out. Now, that's not a blank slate. That doesn't mean you can do anything at all, but it means whatever is necessary.
I was gonna say, I love this comment here. Excuse me, Mr. Burglar, what kind of violence are you going to use on me while you were breaking in? I just got to look up how to defend myself according to the rules. Okay, continue your break-in.
Exactly. And that's part of the challenge is it's like Bruce said, reasonableness is something we were taught in law school. Mr. Reasonableness is a decision that has to be done in court. It's tough to say. And what I'm concerned about is first thing in my mind is I might get in trouble. What should I do? I'll probably do a lot less than necessary to deal with the situation. And that scenario that you gave, the guy on the ground after he stabbed, dropped a crossbow. Well, you have to try and determine now when the threat is over. He's still in your property. He initiated the situation. He has his own motives that you don't know about. And I think even in that situation, it's tough to say. It's really tough to say. And where I'm going to now go to David on this one is the government is involved in this, no matter what. But whether or not the government, charges and then asks questions later in the court, whether or not there should be going back to the previous law that you were just talking about there, Bruce, because we're turning into a very scared state. And we get things like we saw here in the LCBO, where the people are just taking alcohol off the shelves and walking out because consequences are low. And now if burglars or intruders or people armed with crossbows or whatever weapon now believe that they have a little bit more rights when they go into your property because you have to be the one that kind of pulls back and are concerned about your freedom, I think we're going to see a lot more people taking that opportunity to go ahead and do that. David, your thoughts on that? Oh, sorry, I got to try and switch this. Yeah, drop the chat so I can move him.
Yeah, hi.
There you go, David.
Thanks. Great conversation so far. I appreciate the points brought up by Mr. Bernier and Mr. Pardy. Just to be clear, the Libertarian Party of Canada, the platform does embody the Castle Doctrine. I mean, as a libertarian, crimes, including trespass against a person or property, are the most egregious. Let's consider, for example, the LCBO incident that you mentioned. Home invasions are on the rise. It just seems like these types of crimes are off the charts. Why is that? My position is that this is an intentional policy trajectory for what we now have is a very socialist liberal government. Socialism is essentially the pursuit to abolish the individual right to own property, right? All property is owned collectively, and therefore owned by the state, but not by individuals. And so actually the actions of thieves serve to remind people that owning property is not aligned with socialism's pursuit to abolish property rights. Also, socialism prioritizes the collective over the individual. So in the case of an intruder in your home, the collective mind would look at the intruder and the homeowner, and these lives are considered equal. And only in hindsight should we review their actions and determine not which person was acting rightfully for their property right, but let's adjudicate which of these people were acting in harmony with the collective. So is my opinion that the repeal of the as Mr. Pardy explained, the Castle Doctrine, like laws, he said old sections 40 and 41, repealing those would be a natural move, a natural trajectory for a socialist party. I'd be interested to hear Mr. Bernier share some thoughts about, like, what was the mindset of the Harper cabinet of that era? Why were those sections removed?
That's a great question. And when I throw it to Maxime right now, I kind of also want to highlight that we don't know if the guy had a gun. So when Bruce, when you say like, hey, when we go after, like, he drops a crossbow and he's down and he's bleeding, well, he may have another weapon. You have no idea what he came prepared with. And from my perspective, I want to be absolutely sure this threat's neutralized. And that could mean not moving anymore, because I'm not going to pat him down. I'm not equipped with those abilities to make sure all weapons have been accounted for. And I don't know if I should be going through that process. And another thing, Bruce, I want to kind of highlight here, where this becomes like a double-edged sword, is if homeowners believe that someone who's alive is going to be a problem, they may take those extra steps and go too far. And I would agree with you. There is a line to go too far. But if you're telling homeowners, somebody who breaks in could charge you, sue you, they may take it too far. What I'd like to see is a deterrent where the burglar doesn't try in the first place. So that's kind of some of the things I want to highlight there. So Maxime, you were part of the Harper government at the time. What was the logic for repealing?
Yes, if I remember all that, these discussion at that time, I think, the Harper government, I was part of that government. We decided to have legislation more open to gun owners. As you remember, that was a big debate at that time. And we did change the legislation for that. And I think as a compromise for the leftists, we decided to bring these legislation and abolish these sections in the criminal code. I think that was a discussion that was more political, but I don't remember the details. But I know at the same time we wanted to be more pro-gun owners. And I think we did that to please people in big cities and the leftists over there when we abolished these sections in the criminal code. That's what I remember.
Okay, so compromise to try and get things passed, a little bit aggressive, conservative attitude, a little bit there as well. And you let us have our guns, and then you can actually take us to court if we use it type of mentality. So Bruce, now that we've kind of had a little bit more feedback to your situation there in comments, what are your thoughts? Because if someone broke into your home with a crossbow, you neutralize the crossbow, would you feel comfortable at that stage that all threats are addressed?
Well, probably not. But let's try another scenario, because you can always think of another scenario that creates a problem. So let's say there is somebody who is lost in the woods, and it's cold, and while they're sort of on the way to freeze to death, they find a cabin, and they knock on the door, and there's no answer, and they're trying to save their lives, so they break in, and they're in the kitchen, and there actually is somebody in the cabin. And this person shoots them. And then injured, you try and get away, and you're running away, and then they shoot them again in the back and kill them. Okay, so now we got a different kind of case. And we like to think that kind of scenario is sort of the other side of the situation. If you've got a guy, an invader with a crossbow and maybe other weapons, then you've got one situation. And you've got a traveler looking for shelter who breaks into a house wrongly. It's still a trespasser. But do you really want open season on the person who's trying to save their own life? So this is the difficulty with legal rules. You're trying to draw a line. And one of the real problems here is not just what the law says, but it is the distrust that has developed in our law enforcement and in our courts. We don't trust the prosecution anymore to be wise and judicious and reasonable in the charges that they lay. Now, it has been supposed in this situation, people have said, well, the police have charged the homeowner, but don't worry, because these charges will be dismissed once they figure out what actually happened. Well, that may or may not be true in the situation. I don't know. But the problem is that the way our criminal law works now, that even if you are charged and you are innocent, you're still in a lot of trouble, because the task and expense of defending yourself in criminal court is extraordinary. And you can be ruined even if you're innocent. And so the way our criminal system is working right now is not giving a lot of confidence to a lot of people, because they've seen cases in which justice has not been even-handed. They've seen situations where people have been ruined by legal bills when they've actually not done anything. And so there are some problems above and beyond the actual wording of these sections that has brought this problem to the fore. I agree with you that this specific situation is also very problematic, and we don't know where the line is and how it's drawn, but the general workings of the system are also in question.
And I'll give you another scenario, which is kind of flipping the head on a coin here. People who lie. So a stranger is in your house. You invited them in. You get into a fight. You end them, and then say they broke in. Right. So people can abuse even castle doctrine, and it wasn't a break-in, but you could say so because there's no witnesses anymore. So I do absolutely believe there's a line. Shooting somebody as they're retreating is certainly a line. And Dave Chappelle comes to mind. He says he has his shotgun and he's got birdshot, buckshot. Couple warning shots before he gets to the more dangerous stuff. Kind of along those lines, like get out. And then if you don't, then maybe there's another situation to deal with. So there's certainly a room for, because nobody really wants to end life. Okay. You become a murderer. You have to, deal with the consequences of that. So ideally, if everything's working great and everybody's being honest, warning, hello, who are you? Why are you here? And then if there's a threat, you neutralize it.
Well, yes, but let's acknowledge this, though. There are some situations in which you don't want to require the homeowner to do that. So if it's 3 a.m. and there's somebody in your house, then you don't really want to have to figure out if they have a weapon even, really, right? So if they're sneaking around in your house at 3 a.m. and you're not in the middle of the woods and they're definitely not seeking shelter, then should you be allowed to use a weapon to defend yourself against what is clearly a threat? And I would have liked to think the answer would be yes.
Yeah, there's a comment here. How reasonable are people who are on fight mode and fearful for their families' lives?
Right, right, exactly. Yes.
No, it's a tough one for sure. But what I do want to understand a little bit more is the defense of this, because it goes into a criminal court. And I'm going to go to David next, because Danielle Smith, she came out and she said, if you don't want to get shot or beaten up, don't break into houses. Pretty straightforward. We all clapped on that one. We're like, okay, good. You're laying down the law a bit. But then she went into, here in Alberta, we had the same situation. The Crown found that there was no reasonable or guarantee of conviction, so they let it go. But just as Bruce said, there's a defense. You're going to have to hire lawyers. You're going to have to go through things. You're going to be charged. You're going to have to talk with the Crown. You're going to be interviewed. All these processes happen. So even in Alberta, we don't have castle doctrine, but she did basically say to the criminals, don't do it. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, and then she followed up by saying that Canadians have to prove that there was reasonable use of force. Let's highlight something. I like what you said. Nobody wants to kill others, or we should assume nobody wants to kill others. No one wants to be a murderer. Libertarians lean on what we call the non-aggression principle, but adjudicating that is left to the individual, not to the state. I like Mr. Pardy's scenarios. He's brought up a few already. Lots of cases where if there's a threat, then this use of force is appropriate. If this, then that. If this, there are infinite scenarios we could come up with, but we shouldn't have to debate that. In a proper castle doctrine, there is no duty to retreat, and there is belief of threat. We should never have to ask what happened. All we know is that there was a trespass and the homeowner defended their property, their family, and their person. And to leave the adjudication of whether there was appropriate use of force to the state is inappropriate in our opinion, in a libertarian opinion, but also inappropriate for reasons that Bruce already raised, that people have a distrust of some institutions, and can we really trust the judiciary to make the proper determination. For example, Mr. Bernier shared with us some of the reasons why the Harper government repealed old sections 40 and 41. To me, his explanation highlights the weakness of our Constitution. Canadians can experience this kind of drastic policy lurch based on the current regime. This is a problem. So under one government, I can act with reasonable force in my home. Under another government, I'll be scrutinized differently. This is a problem in our Constitution, in my opinion. Yeah, these are great questions.
Okay, so Max, David's bringing up some good points about the Constitution, and there's some issues there as well. I also want to bring up the media. So here in Canada, the media didn't say armed intruder. They just said home invader. And the charges came very quickly. So it was basically guilty until you prove yourself innocent for the homeowner. And when you see this in the US, they always say investigation pending. They don't lay charges right away. They spend a little more time looking at it. If it was somebody that was hunted down or didn't break in, that's going to come out later. But very quickly, the media was vilifying the homeowner here and trying to add sympathy to the home intruder and kind of setting this up to same thing as the Toronto police saying, leave your key fobs at the door. All they want is your car. Like, let them take it. I do not like this trend at all. And I think it's just going to cause a more situation where homeowners are finding themselves in a predicament of trying to decide shoot or not.
Yes, if I may, Jason, also, like Bruce said, the lack of trust in our institution, it's very important in these cases. And that's happening. We are right now in Canada. There's, for me, the judiciary system is woke. The way that we are appointed judges is not the best one. It's under the privilege of the Prime Minister. We may change that. That would be better, if you can have real hearings and you'll know that judge a little bit more, and you can have a real debate. But all that also is important to take into consideration. Canadians are not trusting their institution like it was a couple of years ago, and so when you give the latitude and to these institutions to do what they want. It's that what happened is what we have in Ontario right now, that Canadian has been charged. So that's another problem that we face here in Canada.
Okay, so Bruce, what could be a solution? Grand juries, like before charges are laid? Like, is there more investigation before the media is notified? Like, because right away the persecution of this homeowner started in the media, and they're certainly not adding the armed intruder part of this. So what are your thoughts about that? Because it seems like we are sliding into the abyss of just let them take what they want. If they want your car in Toronto, you're supposed to just hand it over. Well, and see, what's next?
This is a part of the problem. The keep your fobs by the door statement by the police, by the Toronto police. I mean, it also underlines another factor in this whole problem, which is, so first, the police are not going to do the job because they don't want to do the job. For some reason, they don't think they can do the job. They don't intend to protect your car from being stolen. They want you to keep the fobs at the front door so your home's not invaded. If you call 911 in a lot of places, they won't be there right away. You have to wait. Combined with the other fact that Canadians, unlike many Americans, are not supposed to be armed. Like, so if you go into a gun store in Canada and say, well, I'd like a gun for self-defense, please. That's going to be a real problem because they're not supposed to sell you a gun for self-defense. Okay. So the people are undefended. The police won't respond. The citizens are subject to the discretion of the prosecution. The media is against them. This is being set up. This is really, to David's first point, this is being set up so that people are defenseless and it's not possible to protect your own property. So
we were even told don't fire a warning shot.
We have, well, you can't fire a warning shot if you have no gun, right? I'm not saying that people don't have guns, but if you admit that you have a gun for this purpose, you might get yourself into a lot of hot water. So there are layers to this problem, and the part of the problem is that these various institutions as Max alluded to, these various institutions are now being driven by an ideology that is contrary to the Castle Doctrine. It seeks to undermine the idea of both individual autonomy and property rights. And the media, as you referred to, Jason, the media is totally on board with this idea. I don't think that the media should be censored. I don't think the information should be restricted. But I think, I mean, the healthy thing would be if Canadians started to not believe what the legacy media told them, because a lot of times it's just a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah, so the response to distrust is more distrust. So we're going to have a situation where what can you trust? Left, right, medium, like who are you going to be able to trust? So David, when you bring up the Constitution, property rights, gun ownership, I guarantee you there will be a lot less brazenness when it comes to criminals if they do believe people could be armed. Because what you don't see are lawn signs that say gun-free zone, because people don't want people to know that it's a gun-free zone, because even though if they bought it for sport or whatever, we do want a deterrent. We do want people to understand that if I break into that home, this could be a bad day for me. So I'm not going to do it. If you're freezing to death and you need to get some shelter, that might be a different situation. And if we lived in a culture where burglary and home invasion wasn't a growing thing and it was happening all over the place, there'd be a lot less situations where somebody was needing help and it wasn't understood. Because the assumption would be, well, you're not in here to steal from me, because that's not how we do things anymore. You're here for help. So your thoughts about if we get a return back to property rights, we do what we need to when it comes to that. Do you think this will help deter the situation from happening to begin with?
Well, I think certainly the Castle Doctrine would deter many of these circumstances. Though Mr. Pardy raises a really interesting point. He talked about an ideology that we voters in Canada are driven by an ideology, not towards a Castle Doctrine. The trajectory of policy in Canada is toward more socialism. The ideology, he didn't name it, but I will. I think the ideology driving it is socialism. So, like, for example, Canada, like you might think because of all the rise in crime and home invasions and such, that actually Canada, the law enforcement is soft on crime. It isn't. It is not soft on crime. It is soft on this type of crime. You'll notice that crimes against the party are punished very harshly. And we're seeing this with Chris Barber and Tamara Leach, for example. Crimes against the party are the most egregious in a socialist mindset. To turn this around, to turn this ship around, we just have to hope for a trajectory toward more libertarian policies. And I don't mean extreme libertarian policies. I'm just talking about a trajectory that is toward strong rights, strong support for property rights.
Now, Max, as we're wrapping up here, one of the things that I saw when I was in the U.S. and I don't agree with are gun-free zones. So schools and other things like that are declared as gun-free zones, and they become what they're called soft targets because they know that nobody has firearms there. Should that be reversed as well, like even in the United States, where basically say heavily armed zone, like if schools to protect people, because the last thing you want is to invite some crazy bad person who wants to go ahead and go across the line and make a name for themselves and be infamous to go and target places like that. I think even the U.S. is starting to get a little soft on that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, but here in Canada, we are not there anymore. I have the permit to own a gun, but I cannot buy handguns because of that ban. So the society here in Canada, it's against Canadians to defend themselves with a gun. I think we think in Canada that it's a privilege to take a gun and have a gun to defend yourself, and it must be only for the police. And if you have a gun and you want to transport your gun or have that gun, it must be, you can transport it in your car, but it must be sale. You cannot have that that on the seat. You cannot use it actually. So it's very different than the US. But I think it's good, good legislation. We must be sure actually that there's a property right on guns. Right now, the federal government can decide in a decision by the police force that the gun that you have is illegal, and they will confiscate your gun. So I think we must have a real property right on guns here in Canada, and we must change, yes, the way that the legislation are in Canada with that Castle doctrine, but also it's a big problem, like David said, and Bruce. It's bigger than that. It's a mentality. It's the socialist system. We if we need to solve that, we'll need to start with changing the criminal code, yes, but also more education and speaking about people, about property rights and individual freedom. When you're free, you must be responsible of your actions. But here in Canada, the police and the media and the institution are more socialist. Yes, you're right about that. So it's a big change that we need, and we want that change to start by changing the criminal code first.
Okay, so, and thanks very much for that, Max, a lot. The changing criminal code and also setting precedents. So one thing that can happen here, Bruce, is these charges go forward, the court decides reasonable force, end of story, and more people feel like, okay, I can go ahead and do that now. And then the reverse is true. Not reasonable force, guy goes to jail. So we're still waiting for that outcome as well. It can go either way. Your thoughts on that as we wrap up here?
Well, it's just a reflection of the difficult situation. So here's the injustice. The homeowner was invaded. And so you had a moment of uncertainty for the guy's life and his family. And then he was able to resolve it. And now he has another moment of uncertainty created by our institutions. I mean, this is putting the guy through the ringer, and the whole encounter was not his doing. He didn't want it to happen. He wanted to be left alone. And the guy who wanted to be left alone is the guy who's in trouble. Right? That is not okay. We are putting the burden on the wrong party. Now, I'm not saying there should be, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not saying that there should be open season, that there's no limit, but the presumption ought to be in favor of the person who wants to be left alone. That ought to be one of the rights that you have, and that's one reason to have property in the first place, the right to be left alone. And the intrusions of our institutions on that idea, I think, is at the core of the whole thing.
And I think one of the things that's kind of propping up that problem, and David, will give the last word to you, is the Fifth Estate. They're not doing their job. If they said the homeowner was a victim and the intruder was armed, and even just provided those two changes in their reporting, people would understand there was a victim, there was an armed intruder. Instead, they're leaving that armed out, and they're saying charges laid on homeowner. So they're creating, I think, the Fifth Estate is creating part of this problem as well. David, last thoughts on that?
Well, that's absolutely true. We have a media that is bought and paid for, it seems, by the current regime. They want to keep their jobs. Those incentives, those subsidies to media organizations in Canada are very significant. They don't bite the hand that feeds them.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. This is a short segment. I know we got some comments in our chat, but it's on purpose. You're all very busy, and we'll absolutely have you all back at another time to continue conversations just like this. Maxime, mon ami, thank you very much for your time today. Bruce, great to see you. You always make me think, and you're very reasonable. And I think you should be the decider of what reasonableness is. And David, nice to meet you. We're going to have you back at some point. Okay, gentlemen?
Have a great day, gentlemen.
You all take care and have a great day. And remember, we only have it for sport and for hunting. Take care, gentlemen. Bye.
Bye.
All right, there we go, gentlemen. Well, thanks to them as well, and thanks for our audience. Yes, we do have a shorter show. It's on purpose. We have to get back to a bunch of things, and we're just going to continue conversations like this and bring it back. So, Mary, thank you very much for your comment there. And Paula, any last comments from you?
Just great conversation in the chat. Everyone's got an opinion, and they're all typically the same. But no, thank you very much for joining us today and participating in the chats. And yeah, I'd love to see you again tomorrow.
Thank you all very much. Make sure you share this out, spread the word, and we're going to continue to bring shows like this to you live. Have yourself a great day, and God bless.